thank you all for coming. Thanks, Mike, for joining us from Detroit. And Marianne as well. And thank you, Marianne from MaxxKonnect, and she is the one who bought our lunch today.
Yay!
So, thank you. Just a couple of, actually, really only one announcement. Next meeting is next month, whatever that third Wednesday is. And we'll have Gary Cavell, and he'll join us on Zoom as well. And President probably knows the presentation because he's the one who recommended it. But anyways, and then since you guys are here, Mike, it doesn't count for you. SBE members, so those of you who are members, you will be entered into a drawing at our holiday party later this year. And then whoever wins that will get a Members Plus membership on us. So keep that in mind. You have to come to two meetings throughout the year to be able to get into that. So
In person.
yeah, in person. And then every meeting after that, you count to, that's another, if you come to every meeting, you got a good chance. Anyways, Marianne, I'll hand it over to you. I'll make you host here.
Okay.
If I can remember how.
And I have to remember how to share my screen.
All right, but
Oops.
yes. All right, you should be host.
Okay. So now let's see. I want to. Okay, good. All right. There we go. Okay. Can everyone see this? I assume they can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for. Sorry, I'm gone. There we go. So thank you very much for inviting us. We really appreciate it. I wanted to talk today. I'm with Triple Helix, which I can explain what Triple Helix is. Have any of you heard of us? Okay, so Triple Helix is Angry Audio, MaxxKonnect, and Logitech, and Timeo. They are, three of them are all merged into one company because there was a lot of things that we were doing together. So that's how we came up with the name Triple Helix, but we'll still keep our individual names of Angry Audio and MaxxKonnect and Logitech. So what I wanted to talk to you guys today about is a new technology that it's coming. I think it could be really cool. I'd love to see what you think about it. RDS2. So I assume most of the stations use RDS. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, so RDS2 is something that I think can really help, especially smaller stations that don't have HD, that really just want to get messages out. So we all know what RDS is. RDS2, I think very strongly that this is really what radio needs if we want to get those younger generations or keep some people, because the younger generations certainly interact with audio and video in a much different way than we did. This is what our listener has become. They're looking at their phone, they're looking at everything. They want a more visual experience. And the scrolling text on RDS, it looks old-fashioned to them. So they don't interact with radio because of that. That's part of it. So what is cool about RDS2 is the amount of different things you'll be able to do. Number one, it is backwards compatible. So if you have RDS2, even if some of the people don't have RDS2 in their cars, which they won't because the receivers are just now coming out, it's backward compatible. One of the coolest things with RDS2 is that you can now display all sorts of graphics. So I like to vacation in north of Bangor, Maine. So there are all these little towns, and they all have great, vibrant radio stations. But then when I looked at my radio on the car, because now it does display visual, none of those stations can display anything, and it puts them at a real disadvantage. This allows those stations at a very small cost to actually start playing with the big boys by showing logos, by having traffic information that is much more advanced. I mean, this is something you certainly see much more in Europe, and the RDS2 people are from Europe. So all of the information they've given me, you'll see a lot of maps and things like that that pertain to Europe, but it's no different. And it would be great if we could start using this information for traffic. It supports the connected car concept. It's much better at development. It's super easy to implement. We implemented it in our audio processors, and it took like a half a day to do it, and that was it. It will make FM radio look so much more interactive. It also will enhance the PS name. Now, right now, with regular RDS, you can get 64 characters, but they have to be Latin-based or UTP-8 coded. With RDS2, you'll now be able to do 128 characters. So this gives you a lot more scrolling capabilities to actually, let's say, put an ad in. So there are a lot of possibilities that also your sales department will like if they can start either enhancing the experience of an advertiser or just making it more interesting. And this is what the power of RDS2 is like. So all of the stations, even if they're analog and don't have HD, they can use this. So and they could also, if they wanted to, scroll in Chinese characters, which there are a lot of these smaller LPFMs that are specifically targeting ethnic groups that may be very interesting for. So what do you guys think so far of what I'm showing you? Is this something that you think stations would want, or would it help?
Well, I think it would if the receivers were
Okay,
out.
so I'm going to tell you where we are on that, because believe me, that was like the first question I asked out of these guys. So here is what RDS2 looks like. So we know where the regular RDS subcarrier was, but we can actually, because these have now been more or less are no longer used in this frequency, we can now use RDS subcarriers, which allow us to send a lot more data. Now, I got a question yesterday. Someone was saying, well, look, if we are running HD, will this cause any interference? And if you're using MP1 with HD, it should not. MP3, I made a note and am getting more information about that. In theory, it shouldn't, but it's right up against it. So just something to be aware of. And I'll share a lot more information on that. This is new technology. It's actually they've been working on it since 2018. The receivers. So I asked them, there are receiver manufacturers that are now implementing this. However, the RDS forum is having a big talk and two-day conference in October on the banks of Lake Geneva, which I've not been invited to, but at that time, I think they will release a much larger list of receiver manufacturers. They seem to have gone into, dare I say, overdrive to really push receiver manufacturers to do this. So what I'm telling you about now isn't something that today you'll be able to turn on and say, oh my gosh, there are all these receivers, this is great. It's probably a couple of years down the road, but although we'll know later in October, but it's something to be very aware of, because I think it really could be of help to a lot of small stations. And the best part is, nothing against HD, it's great, but there's no licensing with this. You don't have to go out. The only thing basically you need is either a receiver that will send RDS2 information or an audio processor that has it, and that's it. So that also is an advantage for some of the smaller stations and stations that just don't feel the need to have HD. So that's what I have on, on RDS2. Do we have, and I've got a lot more information I can give you on it. Do you have any questions about it?
Has the FCC already started allowing that to be broadcast in the US?
Thank you. I don't know, so I will find out. That's a very good question. To tell you the truth, I think this technology is cool, but it's the RDS forum people are not easy to get information out of. So I'll find out, and I'll let Amanda know so she can share it with everybody. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. I work with Mike, so I might
Oh,
share
okay.
it with.
Oh, Mike, okay. And then I also have a comparison sheet, which I'll send along, which just shows you all the differences between RDS and RDS2.
So Marianne, can you talk about the bit rates for a moment? And is that Lake Geneva, Wisconsin or Lake Geneva, Switzerland?
It's Lake Geneva, Switzerland. That's why they're cruelly not inviting me. Which is terrible. But the bit rates. So I am looking, I'm going to have to get that information for you. On all the information I've got, I didn't write that down. I'm sorry. That's dumb.
No worries. So who's kind of behind this? You said all the way back to 2017, they started working on this?
Oh yeah, this is kind of, it's so there are these in Europe, it's a bit they've always done things on a much more collaborative basis. So they'll get these working groups together. I'm sure there's some receiver manufacturers and others behind this, but in this case, a lot of this RDS forum, these are guys and gals who work for state broadcasters. So you have people like BBC who are behind it and Radio France who are behind it because they want this additional information. So these are the people on this committee. So one of the difficulties with dealing with forums like this is all of these people have regular day jobs. So they're just doing this on the side. But that's how this started. And they actually had approached another company I was working at before I retired a few years ago. And at the time, I asked everybody, hey, do you think we should implement this? And no one had ever heard of it. And they just finished implementing RDS. So they said, no, we're not implementing anything else. But now 3 years down the road, this does make a lot more sense. And especially with the smaller stations, this is a way for them to compete and to get a lot more information and to hopefully not lose that younger audience.
So it looks like it puts itself into the area where the old 67 and 92
Thank you.
carriers
Yes.
used to live. Nobody
Yes.
uses anymore.
Exactly. Yes. Yes, you are exactly correct about that.
Except it also has something in between at 73 or something?
Yes.
Looks like it's double sideband suppressed carrier modulation.
So I'm hoping when when this meeting finishes with these guys, they will also give me all the technical information and technical specs. Everything I'm showing you is literally all they have shared with me.
Okay, yeah, looking at this again, it doesn't go quite up to where 92 used to be, but.
And that's what we were wondering about, because when I was talking to Matt Levin, who's an engineer in Columbus, Ohio, he was saying, ooh, geez, for HD, if you're using MP3, this could cause a problem. And he looked at it more closely and said, I don't think so. But he wasn't quite sure. So that's another question I need to ask of these guys. So are we good on RDS too?
So, yeah.
Okay, great. And I don't want to make this at all a sales presentation. I don't want to sit through a sales presentation, but so some of our products are, how many of you guys know about MaxxKonnect? Yeah. It's, oh my gosh, what a great product line this is. When I worked for Tieline years ago, we could have certainly used something like this, because that was always the biggest frustration, is how to get the audio there. And then Angry Audio, they always make just a lot of gadgets. They did just come out with a new console. It's an analog console. And what's great about this is it's easy to plug into any environment and have as a backup. And then we went with a different direction. We did come out with 2 mic processors, but instead of coming out with a mic processor that could be generically used on any mic, we decided to go in a different direction and make a processor for the most popular mics out there, and very specifically for them. And one is for the SM7, the smooth, and the other is the Rebel for the RE20, 27 and 320. And those are all done, all the work inside, and the audio processing is done by Cornelius Gould, who used to work at Telos with me.
Can we order
then-
them without the catfish logo? I'm just kidding.
I'm gonna tell him you said that. That'll be
No,
great.
no,
Well, they
you don't have to
really
do that.
liked it, but they didn't want to tell him. They didn't want your logo on it, Mike.
No, I love him.
It is pretty funny. And the last product that I was going to talk a little bit about it's called Timeo Enterprise. And what this thing is amazing. You can get up to 50 FM processors. And it's all software based on one screen. So if you wanted to centrally process everything, and I'll give you an example of who does this, is CBC, Canadian Broadcasting. They want to be able to control all of the processing from Montreal. So they have replaced all their hardware processors with software processors. But they want to be able to run it they want to be the masters of everything. So that's why it's not individual. So this was developed for people like CBC. So, or big groups that want to do something. You could also do this with streaming as well. So what's nice about this is kind of a boring slide, but you can have up to 50 FM processors with Nielsen on them, declipper and multiband, and then you could also have it in AM FM streaming and micro MPX. But that's all in one little package. And if you're running out of rack space, this is a great way to consolidate rack space, which is incidentally why CBC wanted to go with this. They wanted control, but they also had just all of these racks of processors that they wanted to get rid of, and this freed it up. So that
I'm sorry, does this hardware live in the TOC at each radio station or at each transmitter site, and then the folks at CBC in Montreal just log into it and stack up all of the different processors on one screen? Or does this somehow ship the audio up to Montreal and back?
What they're doing is, so they do a lot of national programming, but then they split it out for the stations. So the stations would send their feed to Montreal and Toronto, because they split it. So, and then they would do all the processing, because then they're sending it out to satellite receivers. And they eventually can use micro MPX and replace that, but the satellite receivers have to be replaced because they don't support that. So this isn't for everyone, but let's say you've got 50 streams that you want to manage all in one location. Something like that, this would be very useful for. And it's also extremely affordable as well. Like under $3,000 for 50 processors.
Really?
Yeah.
Is there licensing on top of that?
No.
That's very.
I don't know if any of you have met Hans von Supten yet, but he is the person behind this technology. He's also the person behind the clipper in the Omnia 9, and a lot of the technology in the Omnia 9 actually came from him. So he's of his technology, you just may not realize it came from him, because all the things like undo on the 9, that was Hans. So, and then he is a funny guy. He came from a medical background working at Philips Technology and designing medical grade devices, but decided his love in life was creating audio processing. So that's how we got to this point. And any of this, he's happy to give you little demos on so you can try it out. So that's my presentation for today. It went a bit faster than I planned on. Do you have any questions?
Well, I hate to be the only one asking questions, but
Oh, no, I'm
the,
happy you are.
one
Mike,
of the
thank you.
one of the things that has really piqued my interest of late is the idea of having Nielsen encoding, listening, or living in a software environment. Is that something that you see sort of proliferating throughout the audio processing industry? Sort of freeing us up from having to have, well, I think just for the 3 stations I encode, I have 6 different encoders plus a decoding monitor. It would be nice to see this sort of, I remember talking to Frank Foti about this like 20 years ago, and it was one of those things, well, yeah, it's just going to live inside the audio processor, and it looks like they've started doing that now.
So all of the Timeo, and Timeo is also Stereo Tool, so it's the same company. He just is splitting it into 2 divisions. So Timeo has implemented Nielsen and Kantar, which is used in Europe, in all of his software processors. So every processor he has now, and thank you, Michael, I never even thought of that. You could actually just not even use the processor, I suppose, and just use the Nielsen on it. And it's all software based. And I'll tell you the hardest part of this, nothing against Nielsen, but the biggest challenge that all of these companies have had is getting in touch with the right people, either at Nielsen or at Kantar, and there are a couple other companies doing this now, and getting them to license it to us, because that wasn't something that they wanted, or it wasn't in their business plan. So we had to really pester them and keep saying, this is why we need this, and you're not selling hardware anymore, so could we please have this? So it did take a while, just from a business point of view, to get this going, not even the technology. But then once we've gotten that in the last few years, then I'm not sure if anyone else has implemented it in their software processors yet, but I assume they will. I know that the Omnia 9 and 11 have patch points now, but this actually has a Nielsen inside of it.
Yeah, a big part of the holdup for all of this was Nielsen not wanting to give up an API.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, you are exactly right. I've lived through that pain. And I'll give you an example. In Canada, they use something very similar to Nielsen. And we told CBC, the monster big broadcaster in Canada, you've got to call these guys and get them to give you the API. And they just did not want to do it. So it's, it's nothing against them. It was just not what they had originally planned on.
They're worried about reverse engineering it
Yeah.
and people exploiting it. I understand.
Yeah. So, but so far we haven't seen anyone do that. So, do you have other questions?
Can you talk about micro MPX for a minute?
Micro MPX is very cool technology, and this was something that Hans developed a few years ago. So what this allows you to do is you could have, in theory, I wouldn't recommend going this low unless you have to. It could be a 256 kilobit connection to the transmitter, but you're sending it over micro MPX. So it is compressing, but it's not the lossy compression that MP2 or MP3 uses, because those aren't designed for FM. So the problem with those is when you hear any artifacts, it's fighting with the FM. The way micro MPX was designed is, yeah, there is compression going on and it is lossy, but the lossiness is designed in such a way that you can't hear it because it's very similar in tonality to the FM signal. And if you really go at a low bit rate, what you'll end up hearing is something that sounds like just bad FM reception instead of sounding like that warbly, watery sound that you hear with MP3. So most people use this probably at 320 so their processor can sit at the station, and then they just use composite out using micro MPX, and that is also built into the software. And then at the transmitter site, you could buy a micro MPX box, and there are a couple manufacturers for them. I know Telos has something, and then a company out of Canada Saskatoon has called Pippin Technology. They have one as well. Or you could just buy the software, which is extremely affordable, and use it on a Raspberry Pi. I'm not thrilled with that for a transmitter, but it can be done.
And then that just returns 100 megahertz or 100 kilohertz wide signal back to your transmitter, your exciter.
Yes. Yeah, so it was always the struggle, as all of you guys know, it was always a struggle having the processor at the station, because how do you get the composite out to the transmitter site? Well, you could do it with a dedicated line, but number one, those are very expensive, and two, they're going away. So this provides you, and you could go at a much higher bandwidth if you wanted to, but you don't have to. So it could be up to 512. And this is, no matter whose transmitter or whose processor you're using, you could also get you could have a couple of different options with micro MPX. You could either just license the software and then put it in a computer by itself at the station in the transmitter site, or you could use software alone, using it in either a Timeo box, or I know the Omnia 9 has micro MPX built in as well as an option. But even if you're using an Orban or another processor, you can still just get two little boxes, and that is a perfect way for you to send your signal to the transmitter site and save some money doing it, but still have high quality audio. And I'm happy to send you any more information on that, or I think I can even actually get you a demo of it that you could try out.
Maybe this is obvious, but, I'm wondering about how this survives in the public internet. Maybe that's what it was designed for.
So, I think I know what you mean by that, but could you explain your concern about the public internet?
Well, because of latency and variability of transport across the public internet, which I'm sure you're super familiar with, having come from Thailand.
Yeah.
How does micro MPX survive in that environment?
It hasn't had, I haven't heard of anyone having a problem with it, but that's a very good point. And I think most people will get just a dedicated line that it should be separate. Oh my gosh, from your office internet. And you guys all know that. But
I was just thinking of whether or not
people out there that don't know that.
You'd establish a VPN, or maybe, a lot of us have our own private microwave with Ethernet, carved out in the, on the dishes, the STL dishes.
Yeah, I would recommend something along those lines. I wouldn't necessarily, unless you had to. I know, like a lot of the sports stations, smaller stations, they'll use it and they'll use the public internet. But if you were, because maybe they're only using this occasionally, but yeah, I would recommend getting a VPN or something along those lines. And I'll give you a perfect example of this. It wasn't with micro MPX, but it was with Thailand, and actually it was in Denver. So there were people, but it wasn't any of the people here. It was a station that they would, they had a tie line, and it was great, and they thought everything was great. But then every day at 3 p.m., it would drop. And they called up and, they were obviously very angry about this. And it was happening every day at 3 o'clock. And, at first we were like, my gosh, is there something wrong that some clock thinks it's supposed to turn off? No, that wasn't it. What was happening is they were doing a remote at that hour. And then at that hour, they were doing a remote from a coffee shop. And at 3 o'clock, all the schools got out. They all came to the coffee shop. They all had their phones, and their internet couldn't handle the bandwidth. And that's why they were going off so they didn't get as angry with us after that. Well, thank you. I can let you get back to your lunch. And thank you so much. And I'm happy to, I will, if you would like, I'm happy to share all my RDS2 information, and I'll also send you additional information on the micro MPX. And the RDS2, although it's in our processors, and it's great, and it's ready to go. I really just wanted to, I want to start sharing this technology because I think this could really help a lot of smaller stations, I hope. So thank you.
Thank you very
I-
much. Thank you for
thank you.
lunch too.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm jealous that I'm not out there because I love Denver, but hopefully next time.
Nice to see you again, Marianne.
Yeah, it's really nice seeing you. I was laughing because I heard somebody asking earlier if they were retired, but they're working again. And exactly what happened with me, I retired, and then I realized all my friends are in this industry. So I came back.
Are you living in Indiana these days, or?
No, actually, I'm in, most of the time I live in New York City, but I just got a small apartment in Cleveland. So yeah, I had to leave Indiana, but Cleveland is nice too, and very affordable.
What everybody says, Cleveland.
Oh my God, Cleveland has it all. Well, only people from Cleveland would tell you that.
Right, without the glamour.
Exactly, there you go. Okay, thank you, and I will see you guys next time.